All right, so just a quick note here. You know how like with the increasing and decreasing, when it switched signs, that was a relative max, relative min, right? Like the switch in signs gave us an important piece of information about the function. The same thing is going to be true with concavity. With concavity, when you switch from a negative to a positive or a positive to a negative, that switch in concavity is going to be of note to us when we're switching the signs from positive to negative or vice versa. And that is known, that switch in concavity is known as an inflection point or a point of inflection. You'll hear people talk about it either way, inflection point or point of inflection. So on the next page here, you'll see like the formal definition. And the formal definition is a little bit more involved than just a switch in concavity. In order for us to even think about the second derivative, we have to make sure that the function has a tangent line. And the reason why we need to make sure of that is we need to make sure that f prime at that point exists. So we can't really think about taking the second derivative if there's not a first derivative at that point. So a lot of times students remember like concavity changes signs, it's an inflection point, but there's actually more to it than that. There are two things that are required for an inflection point or point of inflection. The first is that you do need the first derivative at that point to exist. And then if the first derivative exists, then you can start talking about the second derivative, and then you can look for the switch in concavity. And if you have that switch in concavity in signs, then you will have an inflection point. But again, there are a couple of examples, you won't see too many of them in this homework, but where the first derivative doesn't exist, and then that does cause an issue for us referring to an inflection point. So first derivative has to exist, and then the second thing is that the concavity changes. Then you'll have an inflection point. And these inflection points are really important in economics. They actually determine like when people are going to be risk averse, and it will tell you like kind of the behavior of the whatever you're looking at, like when you're thinking about like risk and things of that nature. So what happens here again is like you're going concave down, and then this point right here would be your inflection point. And that inflection point is where you're changing the concavity. So you see how everything to the left of this point is concave down. And then when I look to the right, that is where it's concave up. So a lot of times when we're thinking about inflection points, again, it's going to be like a little switcheroo where here you're concave down, concave up, where you could have concave up and then you switch to concave down. But those would be your inflection points, and they're going to be very important for us in terms of analyzing the graph.